All right, Dan, you're not a vegan, are you? I don't think you are.
No, no, I'm not, mate. No, I'm actually a cattle farmer.
Oh, nice to meet you. So, I guess you're not
That's
supportive of vegans, then, I
we've
guess.
obviously that's where I think I'm a little bit different. I think everyone is open to their own idea and they're allowed to choose exactly what they want to do. It's the I'm going to use the term militant vegan that how do I'm trying to say this politely, that their agenda is to basically just bash and discredit every single form of meat that there is. Where we are fortunate in the UK that we have exceptionally high standards of welfare, and a lot of the imagery that you see from, again, how do I word this? The sort of, I'm going to say, vegan propaganda is not from obviously high level welfare farms, and it's the use of that. Let's say in this country, I'm going to use the UK because I can only speak for the UK because I don't work in another, I don't work in other countries. I don't spend time on farms in other countries. Um, but the conditions that you talk about, I find kind of hard to accept when the time and effort goes into looking after the animals that I look after.
But it's not just the conditions, is it? It's the practices. You're a dairy farmer, are you? Did you say?
No, I'm beef.
So, obviously, I'm from the UK. I've been vegan for 8 years. I was vegetarian and I spent
Yep.
some time on a farm. We were actually looking and observing what was supposedly a puppy mill, like puppies being bred. And next door just happened to be a dairy farm. And what I saw in the 2 days that I was there in Wales is why I'm vegan. So, like, that's not footage from Asia. That's not something I saw in a movie. That's what I witnessed in the UK. So I understand what you're saying.
So what did you see?
Animal stance isn't about sort of welfare. I don't want comfier settings for these animals. I want them to be free. It's about rights. It's about us not having the right to violate theirs, regardless of what the standards or the welfare are like. We don't have that right. We take it, but we don't have it. And that would be my stance on it. It's not about hating all meat. It's about the fact we don't have the right to take it. We don't have the right to treat these animals the way we do, even if you think that those standards are high.
Okay, that's fair enough. But again, everyone's, they've got their own opinion.
I mean, like, I'm not anti every single farmer or whatever, and I'm not going to try and tie everyone into a bracket. And you are totally right that many of the videos and things that circulate and are quite often from places in the Far East and everywhere else where standards are far worse. However, my personal stance on it is it's not a case of standards for me personally. It's not. I'm not campaigning for higher welfare standards. I'm campaigning for animal rights because they don't have any.
Yeah, and I'd second that as well. I'm the same. We just want the animals to live free and not be killed. That's what we want. We want them to have their rights and have their freedom and be liberated. That's what we want. We want animals to be free. So as much as you might be talking about improving the conditions and things and the bad conditions, I don't think that's the point. I think the point is that we want the animals to live their lives and be free. We don't want them to be killed for food.
So hypothetically, let's say tomorrow we open the gates of all the fields and all the farms and stuff like that and we let them free. Who looks after them?
Well, just straight off the bat, if you've been making money off them for however many years, you'd be responsible for all of those. You don't breed anymore, but you're responsible for them. Obviously, hypothetically, the world's gone vegan or whatever, or the mindset of the whole world has changed. So you're going to have plenty of people that are going to be around to help you. But if you've been, not just you personally, but obviously in the sense that however many cattle you've got yourself, you'd be responsible for until the end of their lives, in the same way that you would be if you had a dog or a cat. You just would treat them as animals that.
But they aren't in my care anymore.
Well, but either way, but you're still responsible for everything that you essentially have done for them. You've took money from them or money from their ancestors, so to speak, for however many years. So you'd be responsible for that. Not just you personally, but this would be the same for every farmer. And like I said, if the whole mindset changed, it's not like you'd be alone. Your neighbours, your friends, everyone would be on your side. Everyone would be supportive. Everyone would be helping out.
That's a good point. If it's a vegan world, the whole mentality of that and the consciousness of the world is going to be very different to our current world. But the fact is, though, most vegans, when we talk about this, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen gradually. And the only reason we've got like billions of animals that we are killing every year is because of a demand from suppliers. Now, in a vegan world, that demand is not going to exist. And there won't be the animals to breed because there'll be no demand for these animals. So over time, it will gradually get reduced as the amount of people paying for these meat products reduces. So the number of animals being bred is going to go down and down and down. And in a vegan world, we'd have very few farmed animals to care for anyway. And like I say, like we were saying, the consciousness of a vegan world is going to be very different to the world we live in now, where people, 95% of people, support the killing of animals. In a vegan world, nobody would support that. And people would show a concern and a respect and a compassion for animals and take care of them. So these animals will be well cared for in a vegan world.
So,
because even now in this world currently, we've got
potatoes as a vegan food.
Pardon?
Do you class potato as a vegan food?
Well, I guess so. It's not an animal, is it?
Okay. No. Okay, fine. So what happens when I go through a field of potatoes with an insecticide to produce the standard of potato that is desired by the public, and every insect in that field is killed?
Again, we're talking you're forgetting the mindset. So if everyone goes vegan, all these companies that have spent generations making products that destroy life because all they're interested in profits, they're going to have a completely different direction where they're going to try and preserve life like we are.
But you still have to protect your food source.
Yeah, so it would be like, think of all the engineering that's gone into slaughterhouses. Think of the genius, sadly, that to call it that's gone into designing how to destroy life in the most efficient and functional process possible. Imagine if all that intelligence and wisdom went into preserving life rather than ruining it. It's all there, all the capabilities there. It's just aimed in the wrong directions. And the market.
But if you have to, the market has moved, and as it stands at the minute, there is a standard of food that has to be achieved. It's not a volume, it's a standard.
Right.
Whether that's milling wheat for bread, that has to have a certain protein in it, which and basically you have to meet certain criteria. So if you're having to use currently, I'm saying right now,
who sets out that criteria? Because obviously that would be changing with any change too. Everything would have to move, everything would have to shift.
Yeah, exactly.
And
let's, as a consumer,
animals don't mean anything except how much I can make from them. To let's do the absolute most we can do to avoid harming them.
See, and that's where I really struggle with that attitude, because 99.9% of farmers, I'm going to say in the UK, would put the animals' welfare ahead of any money made.
Yeah, but even if you're a beef farmer, but if you look at the dairy industry, for example, if you're talking about 99% of farmers, the dairy industry, the standard practices,
big percentage to sort of say, unless you're friends with all those people and you visited all those places, I wouldn't make that sort of claim personally. I wouldn't say it the other way around. I wouldn't say, just to be biased, 99% of farmers in the UK are arseholes just to suit my narrative. That's a really huge percentage. I mean, just for example, the farm that I went to was random, so that's 0.1%. So I mean, Land of Hope and Glory, the film that was made, all that footage must be from the same place that I went to, and it's clearly not. So, like, come on, you've got to concede that even if you want to just talk about welfare, that there are lots and lots of places in just this country that are not good enough. Regardless of whether they've got the RSPCA or whoever going in, they're still not good enough. I'm not saying that yours isn't. You might be the exception, but
no, I appreciate that. But what like I said earlier, what did you see in Wales?
What did I see? I saw a baby calf basically be dragged away from mum, and mum screamed for 7 hours whilst we stood there, not able to move. It still bothers me now, 8 years on.
And even dairy farmers have said that themselves. They've said that the cows scream for their babies when they're taken away. That's a standard practice in the dairy industry.
Like, it still bothers me now. Like, I've got goosebumps on my arms talking about it. I hate the fact that, I mean, literally, I say this all the time. If you've got the option to watch a video on YouTube or to speak to someone like me, do that. Don't see what I saw. Don't do that. I mean, I witnessed nothing in comparison to what the cow went through, but it still bothers me even to this day.
Yeah, and I understand that. You know, like I say, I haven't worked in the dairy industry. I can't speak for the dairy industry as a whole. And that's not, that isn't particularly a debate that I would want to get into because I'm not educated enough in the practices of a dairy farm.
Yeah.
And while I think that yes, that is what's the right terminology? A consequence. It's been driven by a consumer.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
There isn't, unfortunately. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my biggest hate, to be honest, is waste. And if the vegan narrative was initially right now was to reduce waste, just because it says the 31st of July on the packet and it gets chucked out this evening, and we're not using that because it's gone out of date, where in actual fact, you know, to the second, maybe the third, it would probably still be okay. If we could reduce the waste created, and that would then reduce the number of, animals required to feed a nation, then, yeah, I could get behind it. But when, and I'm not saying it's just...
honest, that would be at least a starting point compromise that I could agree with. I mean, yeah, if people were actually able to use things for a bit longer, for example, rather than throwing them away without eating them, obviously that's going to just straight away lessen the amount of things that they have to go and buy. So I would agree with that. However, it doesn't change the overall. I mean, it would literally be like a starting point. But I suppose it would be far more of a compromise than working against one another.
Yeah, and I'm to be honest, for the first time in a long while, I think you're one of the more level-headed people that on that side of the argument that I've had a conversation with. You know, it is I'm not saying necessity is the wrong word. From a production point of view. Oh, he's gone.
Oh, I'll get him back on. Carry on talking. Just request again. Not your mum, not your milk. And we'll get him back. No. Hold up. You still there? I think he's gone. I think his battery's died or something. I'm not sure. Because he's not requesting, so.
Yeah, his phone battery could have died. Oh, there goes Dan as well.
Maybe it's mine. Oh, maybe it's TikTok. You might be right, Joe. Yeah, maybe Joe, you're right. Maybe it's TikTok. Maybe it's my phone. Oh, man.
TikTok. Can you still hear me though?
Yeah, I can hear you, Mandarin, but the others have gone. It might be TikTok. I don't know. I'm going to check the requests. Yeah, but
check it already. Yo, Richard.
Not your mum, not your milk. Just request again, and we'll get you back on.
So one argument that seems to be coming up often is the insects and the pesticides and the bugs and all these things. That one seems to be a prevailing argument that's being used here. I mean, even in organic farming, pesticides are still used. Organic pesticides and ways of getting rid of insects physically, because they have pesticides that work without the chemical action. I don't know if you know about the physical pesticides. So is that a valid enough argument when we're talking about that pesticides are harmful to humans? They're harmful to what they call it now, insects. They're harmful to animals. Now, what do you think about the pesticide argument? Where do you stand on that one? Because obviously your food needs to be of a certain quality. It needs to be of a certain level. And pests do exist. They do damage crops. they do harm animals, they do harm humans, obviously. We understand that.
Yeah.
We've got, yeah, right. So is there anything wrong in protecting your crops that you're growing from pests?
No, I think Mandarin, the definition of veganism is to cause as little harm to animals as is practicable and possible. So I think, currently, I think we're trying to cause as little harm as we can. So in order to get our vegetables, our crops, you need currently to use pesticides. But like I say, there's forms of farming where hopefully sometime in the future they won't need to use these pesticides as we currently do, like veganic kind of farming, and maybe we can farm crops without causing harm to, or causing as little harm as possible. So
as little
that's
harm
what the hope is.
Yes, because one good argument made by your friend was that all the genius minds of the world have it's all been aimed towards making the most effective pesticides possible. So must kill the most effective way possible for profit for pesticides. Welcome back to must kill the most effective way. Dan?
Sorry, guys, my phone overheated.
Oh, that's common. That always happens.
Yeah, my phone's getting a bit hot too, actually.
And
but we can hear you now. I think there's something driving.
Yeah,
no worries.
I'm driving around in the truck at the minute, and basically I've got the aircon on, so there might be a bit of background noise. And to be honest, the signal around here isn't great, so I might lose it at some point. But I can't actually remember where I was at. I think the other guy just disappeared, didn't he?
Yeah, I think something happened to his phone. He must have lost, I don't know, where the Wi-Fi connection went. I'm not sure. But yeah.
No, fair one. But yeah, like I say, I think it boils down to the fact that initially, right here, right now, and as harsh as it sounds, you've got to decide how much or how cute and cuddly an animal has to be before it actually matters.
No, but I think the philosophy of veganism is to cause as little harm to animals as possible. We include insects in that too. But as vegans, we don't consume honey. So we don't want to harm anyone, whether it's an animal or an insect. And it's not about the appearance of the animals. We don't want to harm any animals where we can avoid it as practicably as possible as it is. That's the definition of veganism, to cause as little harm to animals as is practical and possible. So sometimes we can't avoid it, but where we can avoid it, we'll do whatever we can to avoid causing, like I say, either insects or animals harm. We don't want to cause harm to any living things if we can avoid it. So yeah, that's the definition.
No, and I understand that. But as it stands at the minute, I without any numbers to back me up, because I haven't looked into it, I would be confident enough to say that the trade-off of vegan food on a small animal scale, insect level, there would be more deaths per, I don't know how you'd measure it, whether you went kilo of protein or how you would do it, but right here, right now, in order to produce the volume of food required, there will be thousands and thousands. I mean, I'm actually sat next to a spud field, potato field right now. There will be thousands and thousands of insects in that field. And from the point where you have to plough the ground to where you have to ridge it to make the beds for the potatoes, to planting, to the potatoes growing, for the from it being sprayed, irrigation, all of that sort of stuff, to produce one field of potatoes is vast. It's absolutely vast. And the trade-off from that against I'm going to, one animal, one cow, one sheep, one pig is, I don't think you can't compare the two.
Yeah. No, but I think what most but I think most vegans would say that a lot of these crops that we're harvesting, we're feeding them to the farmed animals, the billions of farmed animals that we're killing every year. We kill, 60 billion farmed animals? But a lot of the crops we harvest and a lot of the crop deaths that you're talking about, they're caused by feeding these farmed animals, because we're feeding them these crops and plants and harvesting the fields in order to feed them. So when you're talking about crop deaths, a lot of that is as a result, like I say, feeding farmed animals. So if you want to eliminate crop deaths and those deaths that are being caused by harvesting these crops, well then don't support the meat industry. Don't switch to a vegan diet where we're just having to feed people and not having to additionally, in addition to feed people, also feed the billions of farmed animals, because even on that point, that's causing a lot of not only deaths to these field animals, but we're feeding these billions of animals, but we're not feeding people. So it's that in addition as well. So there's a lot of
issues.
The
issue you have with that is what do you replace? So in the UK, we are very, very good at growing wheat, barley, oilseed rape, potatoes, and sugar beet. You know, that I'm going to say they're the sort of big five that we are very, very good at producing in the UK, because our climate works for it. You know, all of that sort of stuff. So again, let's say tomorrow we're gonna, you know, all of a sudden we're not gonna grow feed wheat, because, you know, there isn't a demand for it. You know, we've released all of the animals, you know, and I still think that's a contentious argument as to who is responsible for them, because if that animal travels to the other side of the country and, you know, is involved in an accident or becomes unwell or something like that, I can't, you know, I don't think that's a sustainable argument for many reasons. You know, but what do we grow in? You know, I can only speak for the UK. We don't have the climate to grow replacements that are desired by the masses. You know, we can't grow avocados successfully on a commercial scale.
Oh yeah, I understand that. But I think like the guy before, Not Your Mum, Not Your Milk, was saying, it's currently like we're not in a vegan world. But I know you were saying about so we release all the animals. But we did say that it's going to be a gradual process and it will happen over time. And currently, the demand, 95% of people are demanding meat, dairy products. But as time goes by, hopefully, as vegans, we hope that the demand for these products is going to reduce. And as the demand for these products reduces, so the number of animals being bred will also reduce too, in alignment with the growing number of vegans. So ultimately, we'd like to believe that one day we'll live in a predominantly vegan world where the number of farmed animals is going to be significantly reduced. So in that kind of vegan world, we'll find ways to, if we can currently kill 60 billion animals every year and feed them all, surely we should be able to find ways, which we probably currently don't know what they may be, but there are veganic forms of farming. But in a vegan world, we'll be finding ways to harvest crops and feed people without causing harm to these animals as well in the field, and just ensuring that, the world is fed. And even just transporting food from other countries to England as well. In a vegan world, there's so many possibilities that we probably can't consider right now, but we'd find ways to feed people, you know, because if we can find ways to feed 60 billion animals now, which probably 100 years ago would have been unheard of. We're not just feeding these animals, we're housing them, we're cleaning them. So in another 100 years and maybe or 200 years in a vegan world, I'm sure we'd be able to find ways to feed people of all around the world on a vegan diet with the technology that we have in another 200 years time. For us now, it might be a difficult concept to consider, but that's because we're not putting any effort into finding ways to feed people, and we haven't got the idea of it. But as time goes by and technology progresses, what we know now, we're going to improve our ideas on in terms of farming in another 200 years time. And in a vegan world, I'm sure we'd be able to find ways of improving the farming methods to ensure that all people are fed on a vegan diet. I don't see why that would be such an issue, if I'm honest. Like currently we might
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I think currently, even now, there's forms of farming which are called veganic farming, and they're figuring out ways to harvest crops and find ways of reducing the amounts of pesticides being used, and also with transport between countries and trade agreements, all kinds of things.
That's where we kind of have to. Yeah, that's where we kind of have to have a bit of a disagreement in that there is millions and millions of pounds spent on trying to find sustainable farming methods to feed the requirement. Land mass is reducing drastically through, especially coast. I'm in North Norfolk, so coastally we are losing meters and meters and meters every year of land mass. That's externally. When you go internally and you have more and more fields being taken out of production to provide housing and and commercial units that could be used to grow crops quite happily. The problem is you can go in a massive circle and a massive cycle of an argument of saying, well, we stopped building houses. Yeah, but then where are all the extra houses coming from? Oh, well, people aren't allowed second homes. And you can just keep going and going and going and going. And there has to be a balance. As far as land that is currently used for grazing, a lot of the stuff, sort of West Country, hills of Scotland, in Wales, you couldn't physically grow a crop on it. It's not, the angles and how steep some of the land is that is grazed by animals successfully, you just wouldn't get any machinery on it. So then what do you do with that?
You probably know more about this field than I do in terms of farming in the UK and land mass and that kind of thing. But what the environmentalists are saying is that the current diet that we're eating is unsustainable. The meat diet that we're eating. Most environmentalists are saying reduce your meat consumption or switch to a plant-based diet. And they're saying that, if we continue eating the diet that we currently are, like I say, it's unsustainable. And we'll need I don't know, they say something like a second planet Earth to sustain us. But what they're saying is that we should switch to, like I say, a plant-based diet in order to protect the environment. So the experts seem to think that we can survive on a plant-based diet. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of it because I'm not an expert in the field of farming. But according to the environmentalists, the most sustainable form of diet is a plant-based diet, or even suggesting that we reduce our meat consumption. So I would think if that were the case, then there are going to be methods to ensure that we can all survive on a plant-based diet. Now, like I say, I don't know the ins and outs of it because it's not my field of expertise as far as farming is concerned. But according to the environmentalists, it's a plausible way of protecting our future and protecting the planet. So that's what.
See, I think you can kind of align a little bit, as you stated, veganic farming with organic farming.
Okay, yeah.
To a fair, to a fair level. Essentially, there's no pesticides used and all, and that sort of stuff. But it has been proven that organic farming is not sustainable. As it stands currently. Again, you can only go off the data you've got. Organic farming will not produce the volume of food required to feed the masses. So we have to, in order to provide because at the end of the day, it falls down to the consumer, as we've said, to provide what the consumer wants, you have to, organic farming is a lie because they still use pesticides. I think that's probably on an individual basis. Organic farming is very sustainable. It isn't. It's been proven. I think it was Oxford University did a study. It's as it stands at the minute, organic farming like I say, at the minute, will not provide the volume of food that is required. And I'm not saying that in the future that will change, because, like I say, there's millions and millions of pounds being spent on farming technology to try and improve. Yield is a massive word in the farming world. You know, you want a good yield of potatoes. You know, you want to be able to get as much from that acre of land as you can.
Can I just ask a question? So you said just previously, joining.
Someone join. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask. You said before that there is some land that's not suitable for growing crops, and it's only suitable for grazing. And I think the answer that I've heard to that is that, well, the economists have published the data, and it's Oxford University study and so on, saying that we would only need a quarter of the current farmland if we switched to a vegan system. So what they're saying, what the scientists are saying on climate change, is that it's okay. There is going to be some land, like the hills in Wales or whatever, where it's only suitable for sheep or whatever, and it's not going to be ever suitable for growing crops. But that's fine, because we would only need a quarter of the current farmland and less cropland than we do today, because at the moment we're having to grow so many crops to feed 70 billion animals every year, right? And if we're not breeding them into existence, we would need less cropland in total, and also all of that grazing land. And some of that, some of it might be suitable for crops, but some of it might not be. But that's all fine. Even the current cropland, we would need less of it. So what do you say to that kind of stance from the climate scientists?
I think a quarter of the land that is used to produce food, I find that extremely hard to believe. In an ideal world, potentially, that would probably be very bare bones.
It is an ideal world. It's a projection. It's obviously not. It's the idea that the whole world would
exactly.
go
So
is also unrealistic. But what they're saying, if that happens, we would need a quarter of the current farmland, because our current system, animal agriculture, is so inefficient, right? So it doesn't mean that will happen. It just means that actually your fears about the fact, there's some land that's not going to be suitable for growing crops, is kind of absurd, because we wouldn't even need it. We'd need less cropland. Even if 50% of a vegan world, we'd still need less cropland than we do today, because you're misunderstanding that there is this system right now where we grow crops, then filter those nutrients to another body, and before it gets to us, right? And that whole system, factory farming is actually slightly more efficient than the organic farming, because it's using up so much land. They're killed later, so there's more emissions.
Exactly.
Around food, so all that stuff. But essentially, it's just not. Animal agriculture is just not efficient, right? And we know that farming plant proteins is far more efficient. And this is the biggest, meta-analysis to date. They studied 40,000 farms in 119 countries. It's published in peer-reviewed journal called Science, which is probably the most respected peer-reviewed scientific journal in the world. So it's not like, I find that hard to believe. This is the fact. This is what the scientists are saying. We know the IPCC report, which came out as well, which is saying that talking about recommending balanced plant-based diets. So this is what all the climate scientists are saying, and I just don't understand how we're still in this rhetoric about, some farmland is not suitable. I mean, that you must have heard people say this before, that we don't need that land.
But we don't need that land now.
We would need less cropland. So it's kind of you're fear mongering, because you're suggesting that we wouldn't be able to grow crops, but actually we wouldn't need it. So it's a.
But I'm gonna get. I'm not fear mongering. I've got no. I have no fear to issue. At the end of the day, as far as I can see it, as I said earlier, we are dealing with a decreasing landmass because of the increase in population. So as it stands right now, sure, we might well be able to deal with, let's say, 50%, because I think 25% is not sustainable. If you've got a field of milling wheat that doesn't make the grade, then what do you do with it? It's scrap, it's wasted if you don't have an alternate source for it. So
sorry, I don't understand the point there, that 25% isn't. So the point about 25% is just saying, if the world went vegan, it's not saying it will happen, it's just saying if, to try and analyze what would be the impact of more people going vegan, even if it isn't lots of people, it would be better. We would need less land. It's more efficient, right?
I understand that.
But there's no fear
what I'm saying is I don't think there isn't ever going to be an ideal, perfect situation where 25% would be sustainable.
No, but if anything in that direction is going to be an improvement over today. That's the point. Their projection is analyzing what would happen if more people were to go vegan, right? And they make the projection based on what, if it is a bad thing to do, it would be the worst case, right? With 100% vegan, because then it would get worse, right? But what they're saying is we would need 25% of the current farmland, and we would also need less cropland than we do today.
Yeah, completely understand that. In an ideal situation, that is hypothetically, potentially, whatever word you would like to use, a potential scenario. However, like I said, I think that if you have a situation where you have a field of milling wheat, in that, let's say in that 25%, because that's all, that's the only land you're using, that's the only ground that you're in in production. If that does not make the grade to then be used for milling, you then have
I think you're misunderstanding what the 25% means.
Can you just
25%? But you
I completely understand what 25% means.
No, but you're saying if they're restricted to only using 25% of the land, they're going to have some problem because something might go wrong. That's not what the science is saying.
I'm not.
It's saying that in a vegan system, if we imagine a vegan system, we would only need a quarter of the current farmland. It's not saying that there is going to be some restriction where it's like, oh, you can only use a quarter.
I'm not saying there is.
We've got more actually currently, so we would need less farmland. That's the point.
And that's where I'm going. So if you were to use, if we got to a point where we only required 25% of the land we are using, and that is all that was used, you are then putting a lot of eggs in one basket. If you then had an issue, you then have wastage and a reduction, because you aren't going to grow more crops than you require. It's not economically viable for anybody.
So
as it stands at the minute, that 25% could potentially.
Looking at it. It's not a limitation. It's saying that it's more efficient. We don't need to use as much land. We can return more to the wild. That would boost biodiversity. That's the point.
Yeah,
it's not
I completely agree. Yeah, that would be brilliant.
We would use as much as we need, right? We would not be restricted beyond that. We would use what we need. So if you're saying there is some waste, that would be factored in, and we wouldn't reduce more than we need to feed people, right? That's how it would work.
And that would be great. Like I say, if it was 25%, brilliant.
And it would be an improvement. It's not even about the 25%. 25% is just explaining what would happen in a hypothetical scenario of everyone switching to veganism. That's unlikely to happen. But even if we demonstrate that scenario, it tells us what would be the impact of more people going vegan. And it would be an improvement in terms of land use.
In an ideal world, that would be fantastic.
Not just in an ideal world. So not just about the 100% people going vegan. This is even on the steps towards that, it would be an improvement. Not just at the 100% vegan world. If more people go vegan than today, it would be an improvement on the current efficiency of the way that we're growing food or producing food.
Yeah, and if we can get more efficient, there isn't a person alive that I don't think would want to be more efficient. In order to, like I say, grow a more sustainable crop and all that sort of stuff. But like I said, there is land out there that currently, right at this minute, cannot be used to grow crops because you cannot physically get any machinery on it.
Yeah, now, that's fine, because whether you want to say that's, we wouldn't need it. Right, it would be rewilded. It would be rewilded.
So then again, we're then going to go back into the situation where we said, right, we're going to let all the animals out tomorrow. Who then looks after that land?
No, we're not talking about letting all the animals out tomorrow. That doesn't happen. So what will happen is it's a gradual reduction through supply and demand, right? So there's less people buying the dead body of a pig. The farmer's not going to breed as many to put in the gas chambers, right? So it's going to be a gradual decline as more people reject that product through supply and demand. There'll be gradually less and less animals bred into existence. We are not going to have a system where it's overnight we just like stop the system and then suddenly we release all the animals. I mean, that's just never going to happen. It's not the way it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And the uptake of veganism, by the way, it'll never outpace the breed to kill cycles. So it's not even a genuine concern, because like if you think about, you know, chickens killed at 6 weeks old or pigs killed at 6 months old, the uptake of veganism is never, it might go fast and that would be great, but it's never going to go fast enough to outpace the breed to kill cycles.
So I kind of that situation then makes this hypothetical. I'm going to use the number 25% as much as you know, because that's the number you provided. Is it almost makes that null and void, because if we're in a situation where we are producing what we are producing, I mean, I'm not saying it's a perfect balance, you know, by means. I mean, as I said earlier, I don't know if you were listening, my biggest concern is waste. You know, I think if we can reduce waste, because, you know, I think that would as the other guy said, I can't remember his name now, that would be a massive halfway house to both sides. You know, I'm very, very small scale as far as beef, you know, as far as beef farming. I mean, really, really small scale. And I think that
I'm not really getting the point about waste. Maybe I didn't hear it earlier.
Yeah, okay. So basically my argument is, if, let's say, you know, you have a piece of beef or a pork or a meat, it doesn't actually have to be meat, you know, it could be anything. And on that packet it says the 31st of July 2022 is its best before date. And
right.
I would put money on the number of people who would see that and would throw it out. Now, regardless, let's take that away from even just being meat products. You know, it could be anything. It's a massive lack of education of the time, effort, and money that goes into producing food like that. In that, a lot of the food that is produced with a date on could actually be used.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, food waste is another issue, but it's not going to be. I think waste is not the. I think veganism is not going to make that situation worse. If anything, it's going to be better, because animal products tend to be more dangerous if you eat them past their sell by date in general, right? You know, salmonella and all those problems. You know, eating chicken past its sell by date is more of a risky behavior than eating, you know, a brown banana or whatever. So people don't tend to take risk with animal products, so they're more likely to throw them away, even if they're probably fine. Whereas with fruits and vegetables, the worst, you know, they're worried about maybe it's a bit mushy or a bit brown or a bit of, you know, but they're not actually worried about getting seriously sick. So I think in a vegan system, you know, food waste would also be a lot better, because people take more risks in eating stuff.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Although I still don't think that would, regardless, I don't think that would negate the fact that people, regardless of their eating belief, you know, your non-committal family of 4 who have no vegan desire, no meat eating desire, are just a generic run-of-the-mill family, and they gauge their opinion on that sell by date or that use by date. I think that far outweighs the belief. And whether it was a vegan product or a meat product, I think they would still run off that. You know, I mean, I'm a massive believer. I think supermarkets, while they are extremely convenient and stuff like that, I think they have possibly been one of the worst, the worst things to happen in the food industry in the UK. Because I think when food was produced locally, regardless of what that food was, it was traceable. It was, you know, there was a better connection to the community and all that sort of stuff. But it wasn't commercially viable, per se. You know, we can't. Well, I can't say whether it was or wasn't, because we don't know how that would have evolved. But
I mean, I think that's more. It's made kind of more of a distance between, you know, you're right, like people and their food and how it's produced. And I think, you know, if a lot of people who buy beef, for example, even from you, or, you know, small scale producer, if they actually witnessed, that cow being strung up and having their throat slashed open, and they thought, oh, when I pay my money, this is what I'm paying for, I think a lot of people wouldn't, if you make that connection tighter and more visible of actually what people are paying for, I think a lot of people would say, no, I don't want to pay for this. And I think that's the dilemma. It's like
I could say the same thing about if you had a field full of insects and I sprayed an insecticide over it, and and people are paying for essentially crop deaths. If you said this is what your field of potatoes is producing, no matter what you say or how you spin it, not you personally, but say me, no matter what I say to you or no matter what I say to anybody else, there's never going to be an idyllic situation for everybody.
Well, I think what you're suggesting is you're right to say that we can't live in a system where there's no harm caused, but I don't think just because we know that, if just I walk in the street, you're going to step on an insect. So just because that's true, I don't think that gives, let's say, somebody beating up a dog in a park with a baseball bat, and I said, oh, I don't think you should be doing that. I don't think they can turn around and say, hey, but look, whatever we do, you're going to be stepping on insects if you just walk to the shop. I don't think that's a sensible. I think that's a bit silly to use as an argument. So
I don't see how you can use that as a comparison.
Well, you're saying, oh, it's not going to be an ideal situation, so we can never eliminate all harm, so we might as well carry on slitting the throats of cows. I disagree with that. And by the way, on the point about pesticides and crop deaths and all of those things, actually, even if you care about that, let's put the cow in the slaughterhouse to the side for a moment. Even if your main concern was about insects dying in pesticide use or crop deaths, small animals dying in the harvesting of crops, if you care about that issue, veganism is still your best bet, because actually in a vegan system, as we've already discussed, you would need less crops to be harvested. So actually when you count the animal feed, or if you count, the land that's cleared for cattle and all of those things, pesticide use also because you need less crops. So all of those things, they're actually arguments for veganism, not against. I mean, that's been stated multiple times. I can't believe you haven't come across that.
See, I can't see where you're coming up with this land that is cleared for cattle.
Well, okay, let's forget land cleared for cattle. There is, the Amazon, for example, they're clearing land for cattle. In UK, yes, it's historic deforestation, but make no mistake, UK, for example, among all the G7 nations, has the worst on biodiversity index. So we've actually got historic deforestation where you see, I'm from the countryside in Wiltshire and stuff, you see like these rolling hills with little hedgerows, and everyone thinks, oh, that's nature. No, it's not. That should be covered much more in wildlands, in forests and cover and so on. So yes, it's happened over hundreds of years, so we think of it as deforestation, but actually by continuing these systems of animal exploitation, I would call it, of breeding these animals into existence, then we're preventing rewilding. We're preventing that biodiversity to bounce back. So right now on Earth, 60% of all mammals on Earth are now livestock. Only 4% are the remaining wild mammals. So we have a huge issue where we're breeding all of these cows and sheep and so on into existence, producing all that methane, taking up all that land, and then we only have, of all mammals on Earth, only 4% are the remaining wild mammals. So that's a huge issue, not just in the Amazon, clearing land for, the Amazon for grazing cattle, but also in the UK, because it's a potential cost, right? We could rewild, and that would help wild species.
Oh, are you there? Are you gone?
No, we're here. We're waiting for your response.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. It just. I don't know if it was signal. It just cut out. I think that's it's interesting. I would argue the numbers. I'm not saying that everything is perfect. I think that again, no matter there's so much stuff to read that is available. While I would say yes, there is going.
I think your signal's cutting out a bit.
Yeah, I lost him, I think.
As neutral. There is going to be something that is written by someone with a vegan agenda that is advertised as neutral. I don't think there is ever, very rarely will you find something from someone that has absolutely zero belief in one way or another. I mean, it would be interesting to find out, while it may be 60-40 on farmed animals against wild animals, it would be interesting to know the disease.
It's not 60-40. It's worse than that. It's 60%. This is not from a vegan source. This is proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. It's a peer-reviewed paper in the US, a scientific journal again, and it's 60% of the biomass. So 60% of all mammals on Earth are now livestock, and only 4% of the remaining wild mammals. 4%, right? And of course
where's the other 36%?
Well, of course, we are mammals, right? Humans are mammals.
Yeah, they're not all livestock.
Right, okay.
But it's easy to forget that. I know a lot of non-vegans forget that humans are mammals, but yes, we are.
So yeah, I'm a believer that humans are animals. That's
yeah. Okay, great.
I think there is a cycle.
Yeah.
I think we are part of, as much as there is a thing to say that we aren't, we should be a superior species and all that sort of stuff. I don't believe it. I think as far as I'm concerned, we are born as a mammal. We eat what is provided for us. And then we die and our body decomposes and it then comes around again in a cycle. I think that's just how it is.
But when you say you don't think we are a superior species, I mean, I find that interesting because a lot of people assume, like vegans think that, we are equal or that the life of a human is equal worth to an animal. I don't actually believe that myself. I think some vegans do, and that's fine. But to be vegan, you don't have to think that other animals' lives are worth the same as human life. You just have to think that their lives are worth more than a sandwich or a pair of shoes, right? So I don't understand if you say that you don't think that we are, this superior, humans are superior beings, which I might disagree with you, but how then do you justify slitting the throat of a cow if it's not necessary? In the same way as, like, how would you justify slitting the throat of a dog? I don't understand how you reach that conclusion.
So you've kind of lost me as far as whether I think we're superior or not, or I'm...
Well, if you think that, so a lot of people think that we are superior beings, therefore, even if it's not a necessity for us to eat a steak or whatever, just because of our enjoyment or a pleasure, temporary pleasure, let's put it that, then it's justified for us to slit the throat of a cow because we are superior, right? That's what some people believe. So I'm just curious because you said you don't think that. So I'm wondering, like, how do you reason with the logic of, yes, you might think, if somebody is in a survival situation, and I would agree with you, there could be some reasons for killing an animal if it's a necessity, but how do you, reason with the idea of slitting a cow's throat when it isn't a necessity if you don't think that we are superior beings? I don't understand the logic.
So, what would your, if you're I'm trying again how to word this because I'm almost remain neutral and understand your point and I'm not, as I've said right in the start, whether you were here or not, I'm not here to to bash the whole vegan idea. That's not what I want to do. I think.
I mean, veganism is just kindness to animals, right? So
I think everyone's free to make a choice on what they want, what they require. I think
not the cows,
the alternatives
right?
that are produced. Yeah, but you could say that about anything. Like I said before, we don't give the insects a choice when we spray them. We don't give the.
Well, we have to eat something, like you said.
The animals that were in the land, the animals that were in rainforests and stuff that have been cleared to produce palm oil, we didn't give them a choice. That's not a meat issue.
Less insects are killed, right? So we're talking about when we don't need to, right? So we don't need to slit the throat of a cow. There is no possibility of us just not eating anything. And even if you care about insects, right, which I think is a good thing, great, care about insects. I find it odd that you care about insects but you don't care about cows. But okay, yes, let's care about insects. But there's still the best solution.
Just stop there. I do care massively about cows.
But you're bringing up the point about
I wouldn't ever say to anyone.
But you don't care enough about them to.
I wouldn't ever say to anyone they don't care about their animals that are in their care. I think that is incredibly unjust.
Well, okay, but you're saying that people don't care about the insects then because they're being killed. So I don't really understand. What's your point about insects then?
No, I think the issue is the argument that there is one life against many, and that, you know, slitting the throat of a cow, it has become, after much, I'm going to say testing, that is the most quick and efficient way for that animal to be processed.
Yeah, but come on, who's decided that? Human beings.
But if you need to, but that's the point. It's not about. It's not. It. Yes, I can imagine.
But you can say that about anything. You know.
Well, okay. So if we're talking about killing a dog, right? If we're talking about killing a dog, I could by the method, right? I could say the best way to do this to cause the least amount of suffering, to kill this dog because they're in pain or they have cancer or whatever. Yes, of course, I could define a method to do that. But that doesn't mean that I go around, you know, killing dogs when I don't need to. So I think the problem is you're skipping, which a lot of people do, unfortunately, skipping question one, which is what vegans are trying to get people to answer, which is this a necessity? And clearly it's not. I mean, I've been vegan for 4 years, so clearly it's not a necessity to eat steak. So we don't get to just jump to question two, which is about what's the best way to do this, you know, cause the least amount of harm or whatever. I mean, it's great that we are thinking about the least amount of harm, but clearly, if you genuinely cared about the least amount of harm, we wouldn't be putting them in a slaughterhouse in the first place, right? So yes, it might be the best of a few options, but the option to not do it, right? The option to not slaughter them, to not slit their throats, that's not even in consideration. You know, that's off the table because nobody wants to consider what, you know, vegans are suggesting, which is actually, if we truly cared about those cows, we wouldn't be breeding them to kill in the first place. We would be putting them in a slaughterhouse.
So why then? I can get where you're coming from. I can't. You know, you're not. You're not trying to, or you're not.
I mean, I ate meat, right?
You're not telling me something that I am not already aware of.
Yeah. Just to quickly go back to the insects point, something that you know, because this comes up all the time. There's the real single difference, other than the things that have already been pointed out as well, is we haven't got farms out there that are breeding these insects to release to then be killed by pesticides. This isn't a cycle we are creating. Whereas if you talk about the choice, I mean, literally that's what cows exist for. They're bred to be killed. It's not really in the same barrier, is it? When you think about insects are killed because of what's sprayed on crops that people are eating, but that they're not being bred, shoved into that field to then be killed specifically by that pesticides, which is exactly what cows are being done. It doesn't matter how much care goes into them. They're being bred and raised to be killed.
Yeah, and we are currently at a massive, you know, like I say, biodiversity is on its knees.
Yeah.
You know, we are at such a poor level of biodiversity because of pesticides and stuff that are used. It's scary. I think I can't remember the exact figure, but there has been a study done, and I think we've probably only got 25 years of quality soil health left in this, you know, in this country. And that is down to the lack of biodiversity. Now,
so why not?
The next 25 years is going to be far.
Why not? Why not? Because we know that, you know, beef farming is one of the worst.
You can't just use the rewild card. It takes, you know, if I take this field of potatoes that I'm currently sat next to, if I then said, right, I'm going to leave that, I'm going to do nothing with it, it would take.
It doesn't take
a long time.
It is actually quite quick.
It would.
They've done it in the Netherlands. It's amazing. Like I've seen reports on it, and just in a short space of time, it's incredible. And now they have great areas of biodiversity. So yes, it does happen. It's not going to happen overnight, but it does happen. And it's definitely a step in the right direction. I mean, I don't know what.
And it may well be, you know, but it's not. I can't see how. Like I say, when we're facing decreasing. I've said this before. I don't know if I can't remember where you know whether you were in on this bit. We're facing currently a decrease in productive land mass anyway, regardless of whether we change our feed habits or not. We are going to suffer a massive reduce in land mass.
Well, not regardless, because it's more efficient. A plant-based food system is more efficient, so we would need less land. So it's not regardless.
That isn't what I'm talking about.
But you just said regardless of food habits. That isn't what
I'm talking about right this second.
Yeah, but it isn't regardless of food habits.
If you completely
less land.
But it is. The food production does not change the fact that as it stands at the minute, land mass is decreasing, externally from coastal erosion and internally from building. Whether you decide to go down a vegan diet or not,
apologies,
that is a fact. It is happening.
I didn't know you meant like from erosion of from the coastal areas. Okay, my bad.
Yeah. So that's what we are facing currently anyway. So as going back to what you said earlier, when you have a situation where, and again, I'm going to use the 25% as a marker, just as a number, just so there is a reference point.
Yeah, we would need a quarter of the current farmland. So let's not
of the current farmland.
Yeah, we would need 25%. So that's a good thing, right? It's not a bad thing. It's good that we would need less farmland.
Yeah, it is. I completely agree that if in an ideal situation that could happen, that would be a good thing for mankind, in that we would still be able to produce food. I don't know who this Joanna Tech thing is, but she's just repeating the same thing over and over again, and it's
even on the path to that, though, there will be improved. It's not going to be like either we get to the 100% of people vegan, and we suddenly get this 25% of farmland needed. No, it's going to be, of course, the closer we get to stopping animal agriculture and shifting to a plant-based food system, we're going to be able to free up more and more land, right? So all those areas where we're talking about biodiversity and rewilding and all those things, like carbon capture from having more forests and not having to grow all this soy to feed the pigs and chickens, like all of that is going to improve on the way to getting to that. It's not like that or nothing. It's not like that or today.
I mean, so just something that's just popped into my head, and it may have been, you may have talked to someone about it before, or you may not. Now, how do you gauge? Let's say we get to a point where we are at, I don't know, let's say 85% vegan, just for a number.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't ever see that happening. And it's not for the your guys' want of trying or anything like that. I can't see it being a thing. How do you then, as a mass majority, let's say you are a majority, how is that then, I'm going to say, policed? I don't know, when you still have meat eaters, because inevitably there will always be a situation where you have someone that does not believe in the same thing. We see it with religion. We see it with the treatment of animals. All that sort of stuff.
I think it will happen. It won't happen in a terms of like. I think I know where you're going. So you're saying you can't convince everyone, and I think to some extent you're correct. And I would make analogies with other justice movements in the past. If we say I'm gay, so if we see like how we've come along with like homophobia, for example, like when I was at school, it was quite common for a lot of people to be homophobic. Yeah. Now today in like mainstream society, I think we've reached a point where, on television or, examples of homophobia, they're just not accepted. They're not tolerated. Now, that's not to say that everybody is now suddenly, there's nobody harboring, homophobic thoughts or feelings. Of course, clearly there's still going to be that minority, but I think it's a lot harder for those people to act out those positions or those behaviors, right? So today, if you're in a room like of 10 people, maybe one of them is vegan, right? So it's very easy for the people who are continuing to kill cows and pigs and so on to be feeling like, well, I'm just normal, right? I'm not choosing to do anything. I'm not choosing to kill a cow. I'm not choosing to kill a pig. I'm just doing what everyone else does. But then suddenly, if you can imagine a world where, maybe you're at a dinner party and there's like 3 people are choosing not to slit throats of cows or put pigs in gas chambers, suddenly the people who are still doing that, they kind of feel like, oh, well, now I'm not as I was before, just being normal. I'm now choosing this side, right? I'm now choosing to slit the throats of cows or choosing to put pigs in gas chambers. And that's a very different feeling. So I think what will happen is it'll be more of you'll get early adopters, then you'll get people who start to move over, not because they're necessarily passionate about it, but because they're scared about being seen as a bigot. So they might identify with some of the ideas, but maybe they're not brave enough to speak up early. But I think they will quickly move across. And then you're right, there will be some people who still want to eat meat, still, like the homophobic people today. There still will be a few of those people around, but it will be a lot harder for them. So they won't, they'll feel ashamed, and that's a good thing, right? They won't be able to eat out so easily.
Why is that a good thing?
And all of those things. Well, because of the harm that's caused, right? Just as
why
the
is
harm,
making someone feel ashamed of something that they believe a good thing?
Well, it's a bit like, why is it a good thing to make people feel ashamed of being homophobic? So there will be people who are homophobic, right? They're causing harm to others, just like, eating meat does cause harm to others, right? So it's a good thing that people feel ashamed to, let's say, if somebody is homophobic in a dinner party, to air their views. I think that's a good thing that they now feel ashamed, that they can't openly express those, bigoted ideas in a public setting. I think that's a good thing.